Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into the life and the foundational ideas of Siddhartha Gautama.
Right, who most people know as the Buddha.
Exactly. And his insights, they're ancient, obviously, but they still seem to speak so directly to, well, to us today. Things like stress, finding meaning.
They really do. It's quite remarkable. And we'll be drawing from WizVibes' I Am Buddha to sort of unpack the key moments and teachings.
And we want to approach this almost like we're hearing it for the first time alongside our listeners.
Yeah, the idea is to see how this ancient wisdom, from over 2,500 years ago, can genuinely offer some maybe surprising insights for living now.
Okay, so where do we start? His birth, I guess. Back in the 6th century BCE.
That's the place, Siddhartha Gautama. Born a prince, part of the Chanakya clan.
Which means what exactly? A life of privilege.
Oh, absolutely. Think royalty, comfort, security. But the story of his birth itself, as the source describes it, is anything but ordinary. It happened in the Lumbini Gardens.
Right. And there's the dream his mother, Queen Maya, had.
Yes, a very significant dream. A magnificent white elephant entering her side.
A white elephant. What does that symbolize?
Well, in that tradition, white elephants were symbols of royalty, yes, but also immense power, purity, good fortune. So the dream was seen as this huge omen.
Meaning her son was destined for something big.
Exactly. Either a great king, a world conqueror, or a profound spiritual leader, a world renouncer. Two very different paths, but both extraordinary.
Quite the prophecy from a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And the birth itself, under a sal tree, is that important too?
The sal tree was considered sacred, often linked with strength, fertility. So yeah, another layer suggesting something special. And then the really remarkable part.
The 7 steps.
Right. The story goes that the newborn Siddhartha immediately took 7 steps. And with each step, a lotus flower bloomed.
Wow.
And at the end of those 7 steps, he's said to have declared, "I am the foremost in the world," or something to that effect.
Straight out of the womb. That's quite an entrance. It definitely sets a unique tone.
It really does.
So, after this incredible birth, he grows up in Kapilavastu as a prince, shielded from hardship by his father, King Suddhodana. Why the shielding?
Well, the king remembered the prophecy, or at least the potential interpretations. He desperately wanted Siddhartha to become a great king, his successor, to expand the kingdom.
So he tried to control the outcome.
Precisely. He thought if Siddhartha never saw suffering, old age, sickness, death, the harsh realities, then he wouldn't be tempted by the spiritual path. He tried to create this perfect bubble.
A gilded cage, essentially.
Yeah.
All pleasures, beauty, comfort.
Everything designed to keep him focused on worldly power and succession.
But he wasn't just passively enjoying the luxury, was he? The source mentions he was incredibly bright and skilled.
Oh, absolutely not passive. He was exceptionally gifted, apparently mastered subjects like literature, math, languages really easily.
And martial arts, too.
Yeah, part of a prince's training. Excelled in archery, swordsmanship, wrestling. He seems to have been brilliant across the board, intellectually and physically.
So the perfect prince, really, all set to be a great king.
On the surface, yes. But even in that protected world, there are these glimmers of something else, a deeper sensitivity.
You mean like the incident at the plowing festival?
Exactly. That's a key early story. During this royal ceremony, blessing the start of the planting season, young Siddhartha is watching.
And he sees more than just the ceremony.
Right. He sees the hard labor, sure, but also the earth being turned over, the insects, the worms being disturbed, killed.
Oh, okay.
And it deeply affects him. He doesn't just shrug it off. He's moved by the suffering, even of these tiny creatures. He apparently went off, sat quietly, and just reflected on this cycle of harm.
That is unusual, especially for a kid, a prince, in that setting. Real empathy.
It foreshadows so much, doesn't it? This focus on suffering and finding a way beyond it makes you think, how much subtle suffering we just walk past every day.
Yeah. It's a powerful image. His mind was already working differently. And then there's the archery contest story. It wasn't just about winning for him.
No, that's another interesting one. He participates, and he's clearly skilled, but he doesn't seem driven by the need to dominate or win at all costs.
How so?
It's described more as demonstrating skill, but with a kind of detachment. Like he wasn't attached to the outcome, the glory. It was more about the act, the discipline, maybe even a quiet humility.
So already showing a lack of attachment to worldly success, even then.
Seems like it. Another little clue about where his mind was heading, even subconsciously perhaps. These seeds were definitely there, despite the perfect world his father tried to build.
Which brings us to the turning point. The foresights. He's 29, finally goes outside the palace walls properly. And it hits him hard.
Hits him like a ton of bricks, you
Yeah.
could say. After being so insulated, seeing the raw reality of life, it was a shock, profoundly changed everything.
So the first sight.
An old man. Frail, bent, struggling. The first time Siddhartha really saw and understood aging, the decay of the body, something totally alien to his experience of perpetual youth and vitality in the palace.
Just seeing that must have been unsettling, realizing that's where life leads.
Definitely, confronting the inevitability of decline for everyone, even princes.
And there were 3 more sights, each adding to this awakening.
Indeed. Next, he encountered a sick person. Someone clearly suffering, in pain, maybe diseased.
Ah, the vulnerability of health.
Exactly. Seeing that even with all the comforts, sickness can strike anyone, anytime, shattering that illusion of perfect, protected well-being.
In the third.
A corpse. Being carried in a funeral procession, mourners weeping.
Death, the ultimate reality.
Right. The undeniable fact that everyone dies. Impermanence. Loss. For someone shielded from even the idea of death, this must have been incredibly stark.
Aging, sickness, death, the fundamental truths we all know, but he was seeing them unfolded for the first time. It must have felt like entering a different, terrifying reality.
You can only imagine. But then came the fourth sight, which offered a different perspective.
The ascetic.
Yes. A wandering holy man, renounced possessions, simple life, but he looked serene, peaceful, detached.
So amidst all this suffering, here's someone who seems okay, at peace.
Exactly. It suggested a possibility, a path through the suffering, a way to find inner peace even with life's hardships, a different kind of happiness, not based on external things.
These 4 encounters just completely shifted his world, made him question everything about his life, the pleasures, the power.
Totally. It wasn't just a sad day out. It was a fundamental crisis. He saw that worldly things offered no real protection against these core sufferings. The palace walls were just an illusion.
And that led him to realize the palace life, the pleasures, they were
Yeah.
empty, fleeting.
Fleeting, exactly, impermanent. He saw the futility of clinging to things that inevitably change and disappear. This realization lit a fire in him. He had to find a real answer. A lasting truth.
Which leads directly to the Great Renunciation. He's 29, peak of his life, wife, newborn son, and he just leaves. That's radical.
Hugely radical and incredibly difficult. The source emphasizes the internal conflict, leaving his sleeping wife, Yasodhara, his baby son, Rahula.
He almost didn't go.
Seeing his son is said to have really shaken his resolve, a massive emotional pull. But that yearning to find an end to suffering for all beings, it was just overwhelming. Stronger even than family ties and comfort.
It speaks to the depth of his conviction, I suppose, the urgency he felt.
Absolutely.
And it was a silent departure, middle of the night. His charioteer, Chana, helped him.
Yes, Chana was loyal. He got the horse, Kanthaka, ready, and went with him for the first part of the journey out of the kingdom.
So Chana was the accomplice, in a way.
You could say that. He provided the practical means for the escape, the companionship for that very first step into the unknown. Symbolically, it's the start of the spiritual journey, leaving the old life behind.
Right. So he's left the palace, cut ties. What's the first thing he does on this spiritual quest?
He seeks out teachers, but primarily he dives headfirst into extreme asceticism, joined groups of ascetics in the forests.
Why that path? What was the thinking?
It was a common belief then. The idea was that by denying the body, suppressing desires, enduring hardship, severe self-discipline, you could purify the mind and gain spiritual insight.
Conquer the body to free the spirit.
Sort of, yeah. The body was often seen as an obstacle, something to be subdued to reach higher states.
And he took it to the extreme, didn't he? The source describes some intense practices.
Oh, incredibly intense. Extreme fasting, barely eating anything, sometimes just a few grains of rice a day. He became emaciated, skin and bones.
Wow.
Prolonged meditation in difficult postures, enduring heat, cold, rain, bodily mortifications, basically pushing his physical endurance to the absolute limit, believing this suffering was the path.
It sounds horrific, honestly,
Yeah.
but he gained quite a reputation among the other ascetics.
He did. His sheer willpower, his ability to endure so much pain and deprivation, it impressed them immensely. They saw him as incredibly dedicated, a leader in their practices.
Didn't work. All that effort, all that suffering didn't lead to enlightenment.
Ultimately, no. And that realization came dramatically. After years of this, he pushed himself so far he collapsed during meditation, utterly depleted.
Near-death experience.
Pretty much. His companions thought he might have actually died or perhaps finally achieved his goal because he was so still, But he eventually regained consciousness.
And that moment changed everything.
It was a huge turning point. He realized with total clarity this wasn't working. Punishing the body wasn't leading to insight. It was just causing suffering, weakening him, clouding his mind.
Counterproductive.
Exactly. A weakened body can't support a clear, focused mind needed for deep realization.
So this brutal path was a dead end. And then came the story of Sujata, the village girl.
Yes, a really pivotal moment. As he's recovering, maybe near the Naranjana River, this village girl, Sujata, sees him. She thinks he's a holy man, maybe a tree spirit, and offers him a bowl of milk rice.
A simple act of kindness.
A simple, nourishing meal. And accepting it was a huge deal for him, breaking years of intense fasting.
And eating it. What did that trigger?
It started to restore his strength, obviously, but more profoundly, it sparked the realization that neither extreme was the way. Not the extreme indulgence of his palace life, nor the extreme self-torture of asceticism.
The middle ground.
Precisely, the path to truth, to liberation, must lie somewhere in between. Balance, moderation. Sujata's simple offering was the catalyst for this core insight.
And that insight became the middle way. Can you unpack that a bit more? What does it really mean?
It means avoiding those two extremes we just talked about. Sensual indulgence and self-mortification. It's not about being wishy-washy, but finding a practical, balanced approach.
In all things.
In all things. Eating, sleeping, effort, even mental states. Not too much, not too little. The idea is that a healthy body and a calm, balanced mind are the best foundation for spiritual practice and achieving clarity. It's the path that worked for him.
Makes sense. But his ascetic buddies weren't impressed, right?
No, they were shocked. His 5 companions, who'd admired his endurance, saw him eating and thought he'd given up, betrayed the cause, gone soft.
So they left him.
Yeah, they were disillusioned, couldn't grasp his shift in perspective. They went off to continue their own extreme practices, thinking he'd failed.
So he's alone again. But now with this new understanding, this middle way, and a renewed determination.
Exactly. He's rejected both extremes he'd lived. Now he's focused on finding enlightenment through balance. And this leads him to Bodh Gaya.
The Bodhi tree.
The place. He finds this peaceful spot under a large fig tree, later called the Bodhi tree, tree of awakening, and sits down.
And makes a vow.
An incredibly strong vow. He resolved not to get up from that spot until he had attained full enlightenment, no matter what. Total commitment.
That's intense. And he meditated there for 49 days.
49 days, according to tradition. Deep, unwavering meditation. But it wasn't smooth sailing.
This is where Mara comes in, the tempter.
Yes. Mara isn't exactly a devil, more like the personification of everything that binds us to suffering. Temptation, fear, doubt, illusion, ego, all the internal and external static.
So Mara tried to stop him.
Tried everything. As Siddhartha got closer, Mara unleashed distractions. First, visions of sensual pleasures, maybe his former life, beautiful women, trying to lure him back to worldly desires.
Trying to break his concentration with pleasure.
Right. When that didn't work, Mara switched tactics. Terrifying illusions, armies of demons, horrific sights and sounds designed to create fear, anger, doubt.
Attack his resolve through fear.
Exactly. A full-on assault on his mind, trying to overwhelm him, make him give up.
But he stayed put, didn't flinch.
Remained steadfast. And then came the final challenge. Mara directly questioned his right to enlightenment.
How so?
Challenge his worthiness, basically saying, who are you to claim this? Where are your witnesses? What merit do you have?
A direct attack on his legitimacy? How did Siddhartha respond?
Very powerfully. Without saying a word, he simply reached down and touched the earth with his right hand.
Touching the earth, what did that signify?
Calling the earth itself as his witness. A witness to countless lifetimes of effort, virtue, striving towards this goal. A silent testament to his accumulated merit.
And the earth responded.
The texts say the earth shook in affirmation, a symbolic confirmation of his worthiness, his right to be there. Mara's power was broken. The way was clear.
Wow. That's an incredible image. So after defeating Mara, after 49 days, he attained enlightenment, became the Buddha.
Yes, supreme enlightenment,
Yeah.
Buddhahood. His consciousness fundamentally transformed.
What did that mean? What did he understand?
He gained direct, profound insight into the true nature of reality, saw the interconnectedness of everything, the impermanence of all phenomena, understood the root causes of suffering, the cycle of birth and death, and crucially, the way out of that cycle. All illusion and ignorance fell away.
A complete awakening.
The ultimate awakening.
And from this enlightenment came the Four Noble Truths. the absolute core of his teaching. Can you walk us through those symptoms?
Absolutely. Think of them as a doctor's diagnosis and treatment plan for the human condition. First noble truth, the truth of dukkha. Often translated as suffering, but it's broader, includes dissatisfaction, stress, unease, impermanence. Basically acknowledging that life inevitably involves these experiences.
Life involves suffering.
Got it. Second noble truth, the origin of dukkha. This suffering arises from tanha, craving, attachment, thirst, desire, wanting things to be different, clinging to pleasures, possessions, ideas, even our sense of self. This wanting fuels the dissatisfaction.
Suffering comes from desire, okay?
Third noble truth, the cessation of dukkha, nirodha. The good news, suffering can cease. If the craving and attachment are extinguished, the suffering ends. Liberation, peace, nirvana is possible.
There's an end to suffering, right?
Fourth noble truth, the path to the cessation of dukkha.
Magga.
This is the practical how-to, the Eightfold Path. It's the way to eliminate craving and achieve liberation.
And the Eightfold Path is?
It's 8 interconnected practices covering ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. Things like right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Guidelines for living skillfully.
A very clear framework.
Yeah.
Diagnosis, cause, cure, prescription.
Exactly. Very pragmatic.
And during Enlightenment, he also saw his past lives. How did that fit in?
Yes. Tradition says he gained that knowledge. Seeing the long cycles of rebirth, the patterns of karma, actions and consequences, the repeated suffering, it deepened his understanding and reinforced his compassion.
Made him even more determined to teach.
Absolutely. It gave him this vast perspective on why liberation was so crucial and confirmed that the path he'd found was the way out for others too.
So he achieves this incredible state, understands everything, but the source says he hesitated to teach initially. Why?
It sounds strange, but he realized just how profound and subtle these truths were. He wondered if people, caught up in worldly concerns and desires, could possibly understand. Would they get it?
Feared it might be too difficult, too radical.
Yeah, or that his efforts would be wasted. He grasped something so far beyond ordinary understanding, he doubted if it could even be communicated effectively.
But he didn't stay silent. Something changed his mind.
Yes, the intervention of a deity, Brahma Sahampati.
Okay, who's Brahma Sampath?
A high-level deity representing wisdom. He saw the Buddha's hesitation and appeared before him.
And said what?
He pleaded with the Buddha out of compassion for all the suffering beings in the world. He argued that while some might not understand, there would be others with little dust in their eyes who could grasp the teachings and reach liberation. He urged him not to withhold this gift.
A compassionate plea for compassion.
Exactly. And it worked. It resonated with the Buddha's own boundless compassion, and he agreed to teach.
Which led to his first sermon in Deer Park, Sarnath. To his old ascetic friends, the ones who left him.
Yes, those very 5. Must have been an interesting reunion. He sought them out specifically.
And what did he teach them?
His first sermon, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, setting the wheel of Dharma in motion. He laid out the core teachings, the middle way, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path.
How did they react this time?
The power and clarity of his realization, his enlightened state, it completely won them over. They understood. They immediately became his first disciples.
Wow. From critics to followers, just like that. That's powerful.
It really shows the impact of his enlightenment. And those 5 formed the start of the Sangha.
A monastic community.
Exactly. The community of monks and later nuns dedicated to practicing and preserving the teachings. That sermon was its birth.
And the teaching started to spread beyond monks, like the story of Yasa, the wealthy merchant.
Right. Yasa was rich, had everything, but felt empty, dissatisfied. Classic case.
Sounds familiar even today.
Totally. He encountered the Buddha, heard the teachings about desire causing suffering, about impermanence, and it just clicked. He found a peace his wealth couldn't buy.
And he became a disciple.
A devoted one. And importantly, his conversion brought his family and friends into the fold too. This helped establish the lay community, ordinary people who followed the teachings while living in the world supporting the monks.
Then there's Angulimala, the bandit. That's quite a contrast.
A huge contrast. Angulimala was notorious, a feared murderer who wore a garland of his victims' fingers, supposedly.
Yes.
But the Buddha approached him, fearlessly, not with condemnation, but with calm and compassion.
How did Angulimala react?
He was stunned by the Buddha's lack of fear and the power of his presence and words. Something shifted in him. The Buddha's compassion broke through his violence.
How did he changed?
Completely transformed, renounced violence, became a monk, and apparently attained deep insight later. It's a profound story about the potential for redemption in everyone, fueled by compassion.
So for the next 45 years, the Buddha just walked and taught.
Pretty much. Tirelessly traveling across northern India, teaching anyone who would listen, kings, servants, merchants, Brahmins, outcasts, everyone.
And the core message was always practical.
Very practical. Ethical conduct, how to live harmlessly. Mental discipline, mindfulness, meditation. And wisdom, understanding reality. Promoting compassion, nonviolence, finding peace within. It had a huge impact.
Until he reached old age. Around 80, he knew the end was coming.
Yes, he sensed his Parinirvana, the final passing away, was approaching. But he didn't stop teaching.
Still dedicated.
Right to the end. He gave final important instructions, like in the Mahaparinirvana Sutta, his last major discourse in Vasali.
What did he emphasize there?
Key themes. The absolute impermanence of everything compounded. Everything that comes together falls apart. So don't cling.
Be realistic about life.
Exactly. And crucially, rely on yourselves. Be your own refuge. Take the Dhamma, his teachings, as your guide, not any external authority, not even him after he's gone. Work out your own liberation with diligence.
Personal responsibility is key.
Very much so.
And then the incident with Kunda the blacksmith. The meal that made him sick.
Yes, a poignant story. Kunda offered a meal with sincere devotion. Afterwards, the Buddha became gravely ill, possibly food poisoning, though the exact nature is debated.
How did the Buddha handle that? Did he blame Kunda?
Not at all. He specifically told his attendant Ananda to reassure Kunda, saying the meal offered before his passing held great merit, equal to the meal offered before his enlightenment. Pure compassion and understanding, even in his own final illness.
Amazing grace. So his final moments were in Kushinagar.
Yes, between two cell trees. Surrounded by his disciples. They were grieving, naturally, especially Ananda, his closest attendant.
And he comforted them.
He did. Reminded them again about impermanence, that his physical body had to pass away like all compounded things. Urged them to keep practicing diligently.
And his very last words.
Incredibly concise and powerful. All compounded things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence.
A final reminder of impermanence and effort.
The essence of so much of his teaching right there.
And then he passed peacefully into Parinirvana, the final liberation.
Yes, described as a serene transition. No more rebirth. Complete release from suffering, the culmination of his journey.
And even after death, his influence obviously continued. The cremation, the relics.
Yes, his cremation was performed with honors, like for a great king. And his relics were divided and enshrined in stupas, mounds across different regions.
Which became pilgrimage sites?
Exactly. Sacred centers for Buddhists for centuries, keeping his memory and teachings alive.
The source also tells that story about a grieving monk attaining enlightenment after the Buddha's death. By meditating on impermanence.
Yes, a beautiful illustration that the power wasn't just in the Buddha's physical presence, but in the Dhamma itself. The teachings contain the path to liberation, accessible even after he was gone.
His legacy wasn't just him, it was the wisdom he shared.
Precisely. It lives on in the teachings, in the Sangha, and in anyone who engages with this path.
So his life ended, but his impact, it just keeps echoing.
It really does. The journey from Prince to Buddha, the insights he shared, they offer so much to think about, even now.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels clear that this ancient story, this life, it's not just history. There's a real resonance for today.
Definitely. Themes like compassion, resilience, finding truth amidst chaos, they're timeless human concerns.
It makes you reflect. Maybe listeners could think about what part of his story, the early life, the leaving home, the struggle, the teachings, what part really struck a chord with them personally?
That's a great point. What resonated most, and maybe why? What does that reflection reveal about their own life, their own seeking?
And maybe one final thought to carry away. That principle of the middle way. Avoiding extremes. How could that idea shed light on a challenge or an imbalance someone's facing right now in their own life?
Applying that balance.
Yeah.
That's something really practical to consider. It's not about radical shifts necessarily, but finding that sustainable, wise path in our own context.
Well, definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this exploration.